Sony ZV-1. There's a lot to like. It's compact, it's capable, and when you use the American pronunciation, it sounds like Stevie, an underrated character from Malcolm in the Middle. But you might be thinking, hey Dave from Vares Media, you're a glass half empty, critical kind of guy. What are the main problems with the Sony ZV-1 and how could they be fixed with a potential ZV-2? Well, I'm glad you asked, and since we can safely surmise Sony is certainly sipping our sequel suggestions, let's outline my top 5 thoughts plus a few bonus brainwaves. Just before we do, if you enjoy the video then please do like, subscribe, comment and check out the affiliate links to support the channel and to keep it alive. And with that said, let's begin with problem and potential solution number 1. And that is field of view and the need for a wider lens. Anyone familiar with the ZV-1 knows it's designed for vlogging. It starts off with a 24mm equivalent view at its widest, but by the time you add active steady shot or crop in a little bit with Catalyst to stabilize your footage, that view ends up creeping closer to a 30mm equivalent, and that is a little tight for the typical ideal vlogging angle. And while there's lots of solutions, all of them have some kind of drawback. You could add an external wide-angle lens like the Ulanzi one that I've talked about before, which is cool, but it does require an extra accessory, so it adds extra weight, extra cost, and it's an extra thing to forget or to lose. At least if you're as competent as I am. You could use a selfie stick or GorillaPod to extend your reach, but those are bulky, they're another thing to forget, and so on and so forth. Similar issues to the wide-angle lens. You could escalate even more and try to use a gimbal like the Zhiyun Crane M2, which is great, and it adds excellent stabilization as well as that wider view which you can get when you tilt it away. But it's got all those aforementioned issues, plus the hassle of balancing it, needing to remember to charge another piece of gear, and overall it considerably constrains the compactness of your setup. So, a wider built-in lens is the way forward. Something starting at a 16 or 20mm equivalent field of view would be great. That's wide enough to keep a nice view after some stabilization crop, but not so wide that we start getting the fisheye ultra-wide sort of look. If the range at the tighter end of the lens needs to be reduced, then for me, that's a fine trade-off. The fully zoomed-in look of the ZV-1 can provide some cool shots, but I think they're much rarer as a use case for most people, given that this is a vlog-focused camera. But of course, I do want to keep the f1.8 aperture on whatever this future lens is. We want to get the best bokeh we can from that 1-inch sensor. Let's move on to problem number 2. And on a separate but related note, we're talking about crop. Part of our need for a wider lens is due to the criminally crude cropping that we get when using not just active stabilization, but also 4K shooting instead of 1080p. You're seeing the impact and the ratios of cropping caused by those two things on screen right now, and they're pretty significant, especially together. So, the homework for Sony: eliminate the 4K crop. I can understand the need to crop in for the digital active steady shot stabilization, but I think it could probably be reduced. Now, Sony, I understand there may be limits to what is doable or cost-effective as far as engineering lenses goes, or serendipitous software sophistication for stabilization. So, consider our first point around a wider lens and our second point around cropping together. Let's try and work backwards to have some combination of solutions, which gives us a wider view in 4K with stabilization applied. If the end result is around a 24mm field of view or a bit wider, then great. But like optimistically undersized underwear, any tighter is not cool. And our last incestuously intersecting issue to intimate is our third point centered around that vlogging use case: stabilization. Now, don't get me wrong, I quite like the active steady shot of the ZV-1. For my taste, it's one of the more effective implementations of stabilization I've seen across most Sony cameras. I trust it as a very solid option for static handheld shots, and it's definitely usable for typical walking vlogging scenarios. The ZV-1 also has Catalyst gyroscopic stabilization, which is straight up excellent, provided that you can shoot with the settings that you need to get the best results. Full guides are linked if you're unfamiliar, but that need for post-production to use Catalyst is an extra step which I could live without. So, what do I want? Give me a slightly smoother and more refined active steady shot to optimize the in-camera stabilization experience. We've already seen cameras like the A7S III and A7 IV implement comparable or arguably better versions of active steady shot. Plus, as a tech company, I'd like to think the lessons that Sony is picking up from both Catalyst, the stabilization of other camera models, and the stabilization technology in their Xperia smartphones does provide an opportunity for some of that know-how and development to boost the capability for our ZV-2 and get even smoother. Now, we're going to move on from that core vlogging experience to the broader user experience with point 4. So let's talk tinkering with tactility and that tempestuous touchscreen. There are 3 user experience issues that I'd like to address here. First, make the touchscreen actually work as a touchscreen. Yes, you can use touch focus and a few other things, which is nice, but by this point in time, and especially beyond 2022, you really should be allowing full touch operation, Sony. As a result, that includes bringing the updated menus and menu system that you'll find on the A7S III and newer Sony cameras. Now, I didn't find the older style menus to be a big problem, like some people, but now that I have the A7 IV, I can definitely confirm that the new ones are superior. So let's get those, please. And lastly, on the subject of the screen, let's lift the luminosity. More screen brightness would help when shooting in bright environments, which is not a crazy idea for something that a lot of daytime vloggers might use, and it's definitely helpful on a system which doesn't have a viewfinder. Plus, let's not have the screen brightness fall when we're using particular settings or modes as well. And last but not least in my personal list of the top 5 improvements for Mr. ZV-1 is battery life. Like the wide lens, this is certainly surmountable with having spares, using a power bank and so on, but it's certainly a hassle and it's easy enough to overlook that it can be problematic when you're in the flow of shooting. Now, I typically get 60 to 70 minutes at 4K 24 frames per second, but I have heard others manage less, and in some cases as little as 45 minutes of shooting time. So in an ideal world, I'd like to see something like a 25 to 50% increase in those numbers, just to keep things somewhat realistic. Now, if you could consistently get nearer to 90 minutes of 4K on the pocketable powerhouse that could be the ZV-2, then that would be very solid. I'm not assuming that developing new battery technology is super easy, so if we do need a slightly bigger body to improve that endurance, then that's okay. Hell, it might even be nice and allow a few extra customizable buttons too. Indeed, maybe a little bit of upsizing while preserving the potently prescient pocketability could be a win. So those are my top 5 issues with the ZV-1 and potential solutions for the ZV-2. Now, I'm sure you guys will have your own thoughts, so please do let me know down in the comments. And if you've enjoyed the video, then also please do like, subscribe, check out the affiliate links and help keep the channel going. And now, just to close things out, here is a wider wish list of variable viability that I'm going to speed through just to cover some more ground. So 6, add the S-Cinetone picture profile. 7, add a filter thread to the lens so it's easier to attach external accessories. 8, give the internal ND filter a larger range than 3 stops. And 9, switch from micro USB to USB-C for charging and data transfer. Of course, it's key to acknowledge there's plenty of other things that we could wish for, but there's always a balance to strike between technical feasibility, cost, and how many users are actually going to care about some of those potential improvements. But one potential improvement I can definitely recommend for everyone is that, until next time, you take it easy.